Welcome to this Your Alarm webinar. It's the last one this year on how can digitalization of remote services shape the fire industry. Let me start with introductions of the speakers today. I'm Jan Kuns, I'm the president of Your Alarm, but I'm also in an industry affairs manager for Siemens. We'll have Brian Cunningham, the Chief Technology Officer for Drax 360, Miguel Cole, the Global Service Portfolio Manager for Siemens, Fabio Santosi, Key Account Manager and Business Development of Home and Business for Securiton, and finally, Anya Schäfers, Product Marketing Manager for Johnston Controls, but also she's the Your Alarm Chair of the Marketing Committee. So that's the proud group that you have of panelists that will be talking about this subject. Before I start, if you have any questions during the presentation, please post them on the chat so that we can answer them later. I'll get to those as soon as we're ready. So for those of you that don't know Your Alarm, let me give you a quick, and I say quick, overview about Your Alarm. Your Alarm is the leading European industry association representing the fire safety and security industries. We offer advice and expertise to the industry, the market, policymakers, and standardization bodies. For us, the way that we see it, we represent companies that employ about 700,000 people in Europe. We represent a 67 billion euro market with a forecasted growth of 11% until 2025. Now, to do all of those wonderful things that I've just explained, we're organized into 4 sections: a fire extinguishing section, a fire detection section, a security section, and a services section. It is the services section that is going to do this presentation after I am finished with my slides. And if you go to the next, and I'll explain what we focus on. So we focus on shaping the fire and security industry as a leader in innovation, helping European companies to take advantage of global market opportunities. And what we do to do that is that we actively support the single European market, ensuring high standards are upheld. We also, and this is the target for this presentation, is meeting the challenges of digitalization, ensuring sustainable supply of innovations, as well as one of the points that came up in the past, I'd say 18 months, is ensuring qualified and well-trained workforce to design, install, and maintain our systems, ensuring sustainable supply of innovations, and contributing to a green Europe as an opportunity for growth. We also are interested to see the industry performance through a diverse workforce. So that's a quick or very quick overview of Your Alarm. I did it quickly because I think there's plenty of very interesting content that will be presented from the presenters. And our first presenter is Fabio Santosi of Securiton. Fabio?
Thank you, Jan, and welcome also from my side. I would like to talk about global trends, and therefore I will touch on technological, economical, political, and social trends. Starting with technological trends and the impact of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is transforming our world, and it's on us to make sure that it goes well. How far it will go and change our daily lives, we can't tell yet, because we're still at the beginning of this journey. But it will for sure have an impact on ourselves and the industries. Maybe the way how we work or learn today is changing in the next few months or even tomorrow. As I said, we don't know yet, but we'll find out together. The demand of multiple technologies that are merging together is bigger than ever. Software, hardware from different sources that are working together, or if we talk about our industry, a video security system and an intrusion alarm system are combined to one security system without having any issues. And most important is using only one interface for all action and alarms is, as I said, bigger than ever. Therefore, we need a certain point of standards in our solutions, services, and processes. This requires, at the end, an enormous amount of flexibility and new requirements, especially for the launch of new products and services. Coming to the next trend is economical trend. Although inflation rates are falling again, we do not know in which direction interest rates will go in the near future. And also the uncertainty of currency markets and exchange markets is creating an uncomfortable mood worldwide. On the other hand, due to new possibilities in technology, where we are able to enjoy and experience new business models, such as a service, are higher than ever. And we have also new business opportunities already taking place, for example, as cloud services or remote services, where my colleagues will touch on later on. And also cybersecurity, there's new business models around the corner. On the next slide, we have political and social trends coming up. So higher requirements of sustainability demand companies to make a major commitment to conscious use of resource and investment today for ongoing decarbonization in the next years, which is not always easy to digest, especially for smaller companies, as well as data privacy and protection. Also here, requirements in data security increased a lot after the GDPR was established a few years ago. And lately, the global situation with conflicts around the world, which are resulting in sanctions. And these sanctions can have a major impact on our supply chains. Although the corona pandemic had a bigger impact on our industry so far, others are very much influenced by these conflicts, and we don't know how far it will go. So maybe the impact on our industry is coming in the next few months or years. And last but not least, we come to social trends, which are a shortage of manpower. And the shortage of skilled workers is causing uncertainty in several industries. Also in our industry, we're facing the situation where there is an insufficient number of workers available to meet the demand of the market. This shortage is also causing a lack of resources due to retirements of employees. It means that the know-how and the experience that we're losing from these people retiring is tremendous in the next few years. And it takes time to build that knowledge with new generations like Generation Z. For these young people, also new sorts of values are more important, such as life balance that we hear all the time, or to see a purpose in their work of what they're doing, like in an everyday work environment. So I hope I gave you a quick overview of the global trends that we're currently facing. I know there are many, more than ever. And for that, I would like to thank you and hand over for Anya to the next slides to continue that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Fabio. Good afternoon, everyone. So, yeah, you've gained some insights on the global trends from Fabio, and obviously all these global trends also have an impact on the operation of the buildings, right? So there are definitely some challenges that everybody that operates a building needs to work with. So it's a lot around sustainability. Every building today has sustainability goals that they need to achieve. it's about the safety and security of the building. So we need to make sure that the people that work and live in the buildings are kept safe and secure. There are huge customer expectations today. So what Fabio just mentioned about the Generation Z, they really ask around what we are doing to keep the building sustainable, right? They even drive their buying decisions based on that factor. We already have seen that we have a maturing workforce because a lot of the baby boomers are going to be retired in the next couple of years. So that, of course, also gives some challenges in having enough workforce to maintain the building operations. Also, there are much more higher costs with operating a building today. This is not due to only the fact of inflation, but also to high energy prices and so on. There is also the issue of the regulatory compliance. As you know, there is a huge tsunami of regulations and standards that everybody and every building needs to follow, and that obviously also can present some of the challenges today. Two other things that I would like to highlight here is the aging infrastructure of the building, and of course the false alarms, and I will dive into a little bit more detail on the next slide. Right. So basically, some of the trends and the challenges in the building give us some interesting facts, because 90% of the people spend almost all day indoors today, which is like a massive number. And of course, we want to make sure that they are well protected and that the buildings are operated at the best performance and sustainability. Another interesting fact is that most of the people would think that construction really drives the cost of a building during the life cycle, but in fact, it's 80% of the total life cycle costs that are occurring in the operation phase, not in the construction phase. So as we can see, there is a huge potential here for improvement, and digitalization can help with that. And of course, if we want to tackle the climate crisis, then we also need to make sure that we get the energy reduction in place for the buildings, because today 40% of the energy worldwide are consumed by buildings. On the next slide, we will see how that translates into the fire safety landscape, right? So a lot of the trends and the challenges that we have just seen are also very important for the fire safety landscape. So, for example, the fire risks that we have today are evolving. So if you think about electric vehicles, they present new fire risks, and the building needs to be protected against the fire risks. We already heard about the labor shortage, which means we have less people on the ground that can help doing all the work that's needed with the fire safety systems. But also systems are getting more complex. So we also need to make sure that we use the data that helps us to take the right decisions with the system. Also here we are seeing aging infrastructure, so systems need to be updated. The false alarms are another very big topic. And of course, we also want to make sure that there is an interoperability between the different systems in the building so that they smoothly work together. Within the fire safety landscape, it's also really important that we, again, are compliant with our systems, with the products that we use. And of course, we also need to think about sustainability when we talk about our products and how our systems can help to be more designed based on economical design, which could mean our products should be less energy or should be used with less energy consumption, or we could think about recycled products as well. If we go to the next slide, I would also like to give you an update on the false alarms, because like we've shown before, the false alarms are really a big issue or a big challenge within the buildings, and there is a huge potential here with digitalization as well. So as you might know, Euralarm has published quite a comprehensive study on false alarms some time ago. And just to give you a bit of a background, basically a false alarm is defined by having an alarm but no fire condition, right? So the reasons for that could be different, could be the equipment failures because of the maintenance or service that wasn't done properly. It could be of a deceptive alarm, which could be caused by steam or by dust. Or of course, we have people in the building, so could always be a malicious or unintended alarm. And on the right side, you can see some interesting charts, interesting statistics about the fire alarms. And what we can see here is that from up to 83 to 99% of all the fire alarms that occur are false alarms. So really only a minority of all the alarms are real fire alarms, but a lot of the alarms are unwanted alarms. So as you can see, there is a huge potential here to work with the data to get these numbers down and decrease false alarms. If we go to the next slide, please. Then obviously what we have seen is we have a lot of challenges, we need to tackle them, and the digitalization can help on that and is already helping, but will even be more helping on that in the future, right? So obviously there are a lot of advantages of digitalization on how the data is collected, because it means we can quicker react to any incidents because we already have collected data that helps us to take the right decisions. It also means that we can do condition-based maintenance or also find the optimal timing, right? So that we don't wait until all the detectors are dirty and go into a fault mode, but that we already plan ahead and do when the maintenance is really necessary. This also means that we can improve the cost effectiveness of our system because we are reducing any downtimes, we are reducing any disturbances, which also means that the system can be in a better state. In addition to that, we are also using the resources in a much better way, and we also have operator support, which means that the data can help us to take the right decisions and to come from a reactive mode to a proactive mode, but also to a preventive mode in the future. Right, and if we think about digitalization, then on the next slide, let's see what digital services mean, because it's really important to understand what the definition and what the scope is and maybe what it is not. Right, so definition of digital service is any service that's offered that leverages the technology, the connectivity, the system and the sensor data, and remotely available expertise for the management and the optimization of a client system. So this is basically how it's defined. And what is excluded from digital services are any technologies, the provision of the technology and the implementation, but also software as a service is included because this is really only the enabler, or any classic on-site services as well. Right, so digital services can be found with a lot of different names in the market, like connected services, integrated services, or enabled services. And basically with that, I would like to hand over to Miguel, because he will tell us how all this data and how the digital services can help us in the future.
Thank you, Anya. Good day, everyone. So our fire safety industry is in a journey towards modernization and digitalization after many years of being, I would say, progressing at the rhythm of regulations. Now this industry is really catching up with innovation and technology. And to start the discussion, let's take this picture from McKinsey and let's see what in general, not only for the fire industry, but in general, what it means to collect data. And if we see as the solution grows in the complexity of what we do with the data, we can have condition-based type of maintenance. This is mainly related to adding transparency to what is the status of the installation, to then go into advanced troubleshooting, where we are able to understand the situation shown by the data in terms of what is the status of the components, what is the health of the system. So remotely be able to understand what is the situation of that building and what tasks need to be performed in order to keep the expected reliability, resilience of the building. To then go into the highest complexity that can be performed with the data being collected, which is predictive maintenance, which is using data analytics and understanding what is the degradation and the wearing of specific parts to then react and only perform maintenance when we see that the situation needs to be attended immediately. This is, for example, where we are in the aviation industry with jet engines. So I would say our fire industry is between 1 and 2. So we are well on the way with condition-based, and we are starting to do some advanced troubleshooting based on the data lakes that we generate collecting data from our sites. But overall, not only for fire, but in general, collecting data, not any data, but data with purpose, the relevant data, meaningful data, help us increase the business continuity, so impact on the uptime, help us increase the predictability and the type of activities that need to be performed on a site, and overall help us in the cost efficiency and OPEX on a given building or installation in general. Next, please. So as we dig into the fire safety service scheme that the industry is in general utilizing, we can see more or less these 6 type of services in all manufacturers and in all regions. So number 1 is corrective maintenance. So we go when something is wrong. Number 2 is we do quarterly annual services under a given service scheme or contract. And then number 3 and 4 is where we're getting today, connecting sites, understanding what is the situation. So that type of transparency and actions being taken given by the analysis of the data that we do to then go into number 5, which is probably the next step in the next couple of years, which is data analytics. So understanding the trend and the processes that the several systems are going through, understand what is going to be the degradation, what is going to be the need for service in 6, 12, 18, 24 months to have that type of predictive activities on the systems. Number 6, which is managed services. This has been available for many years and is, I lost the slide. Yeah, thank you. And it's kind of across the all of the activities, managed services that can be offered where we, I don't know, the whole administration and operation and service of one facility is being offered by a manufacturer. So if we move to the next. And kind of what is the topology that the digital services are adopting? And in a very general scheme, I would say single systems or small networks or big campus networks are being connected through a gateway, a secure gateway that gets data into the cloud through secure connectivity and then applies computing in the cloud that help us do analytics and visualization of different type of screens. And on the top, we have a service layer, which is going to be consumed by different personas. It can be the facility manager, it can be owners of the building, it can be the service organization that is attending a certain building or a certain fire system. So moving to the next and going a little bit more in detail, dashboard is the main tool that a facility manager or a building owner is gonna use in order to understand the whole situation around a fire system in a building, in a group of building, or maybe in a whole organization. And this type of dashboard today can provide access to all type of information from commercial, contractual information, the tickets that are being raised based on needs from the system, to the workflows that are being followed, to then getting into individual systems and understanding what is the status, what is the general situation of the health of the system, and then very important, very impactful is the generation of reports. And these reports, they are conceived not only for I would say reporting activities, but also for compliance. And in many cases, for example, healthcare in the US, these reports, they trigger and contribute to a big number of subsidies that the government would offer if the reports show that the activities requested are being fulfilled. So a number of benefits for the users. So the whole transparency, peace of mind, the system is ready to operate, the system is active and in good condition, to visualization of different locations. So for a campus operator, this is very valuable to be able to see and dig into the specific data in specific buildings, to the whole communication with service suppliers and uploading documents, pictures, files, request services, and the whole preparation of internal and external reports. Going to the next. The availability of data in the cloud allows service organizations to perform a lot of activities to support the operation of the systems on site. And experts working in so-called remote operation center or digital center, as the one you can see in the picture, that can be an enormous value to facility managers. So the understanding of what's going on in an installation can help support troubleshooting and with that the time to resolve and the business interruption can be minimized. It also helps prepare the interventions. So at hand of the above side visibility, the dispatching teams can help technicians prepare the spare parts, prepare the troubleshooting that is needed for a noisy site. They can also provide a number of different reports that can help advise customers in actions needed in a certain system to make sure that the system has the right programming in the different zones for the type of risk in the building. Remember, our buildings, they have a life cycle of 20, 30, 50 years, and they are dynamic. Our buildings are changing the use. Rooms are changing on a regular basis in hospitals. What was a laundry could be a dining room, becomes a meeting room, and with that, the fire profile of the different rooms changes drastically. So at hand of small reports, this type of operation centers can provide technicians the right information, the right smart reports based on data that can help go on site, advise the customer for adjusting the programming of the systems and making systems be also flexible and follow the utilization of spaces in all buildings. So with that, the digital services are adding a huge component of flexibility to the buildings. And the dynamic of the building can be now followed by the, I would say, by the programming of the fire systems. Next one. The mobile apps that are available today to monitor fire systems or fire networks in a campus operation, this is a huge topic. I mean, it allows facility managers to have the peace of mind that everything in a big installation is running smoothly, and the customization to understand the severity of different warnings or different alarms in the middle of a weekend help understand whether a sudden intervention in a site is needed, or if the warning, I don't know, is a battery going low, and that can wait until Monday. And the full flexibility that the apps are offering today, that helps set up different type of users that access different type of information. So the flexibility that offers not only to the facility managers, but also to technicians offering services in running through a site and testing devices and being able to follow the testing activity through mobile devices, saving a lot of time that would otherwise be spent in running or driving through different buildings in a big campus. So this is becoming also very powerful. Next one, please. The digital reports I mentioned before, there is a number of digital reports. I will not go into details, but reports today can not only give the status in general of a big installation, but also show the status of single components. And together with that, the reports can help the whole documentation of the testing and maintenance activity, and with that, a huge support to facility managers. I mean, minimizing the need for troubleshooting complex installation can be done together with smart reports and an expert in a fraction of the time of what would normally take for a big installation. If first of all we needed to understand how is the problem occurring. So next one, please. The big transformation of the fire industry is also going to have an impact on our technicians. So our technicians were, until today, you can see the picture on the left, doing a lot of manual activities on site, testing, inspections, and manual jobs. In the future, and based on everything that I commented before, our technicians become kind of consultants, people that have a lot of smart information coming from data analytics at hand and can support customers in improving the resilience of the systems by making the right measures and the right decisions in terms of A, programming of the system, B, what are the components that are going through degradation, and we need to start planning for budgets in the coming year or 2 years to then find that perfect fine-tuning of the installation that offers the highest reliability and resilience. And with that, I'm gonna give over to Brian.
Thank you, Miguel, and thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. Well, as part of this digital transformation within our industry, We've looked at trends, we've looked at some of the really interesting information that's been collected by Euralarm, which Anja had touched on, and with Miguel we looked at the topology and the major components. I think it's now time to turn our attention to standardization, because without standardization, really we run the risk as an industry of everybody doing their own thing with very little control or consistency. So in terms of standards, there are a number of standards, but the main standard that Euralarm has played quite a big role in bringing to completion is EN 50710, which is the remote services standard. So everything that we've touched on as part of today's webinar is encapsulated by the remote services standard, and it's a legal framework for how remote services should be designed and implemented. And it's intended for both users and service providers and everyone in between, ultimately to provide market confidence, but also to ensure that there is some set of consistent standard right across the European Union. Sitting right at the center of that is the remote access server, and that really ensures, or it acts as the binding agent, if you like, which brings together secure software systems with hardware deployed in the field for monitoring life safety systems, such as fire detection systems. Bringing all of that data back to a central point, security for processing, and then, as Miguel touched on in his slides, about being able to give stakeholders the ability to do something meaningful with that data through reporting, advanced analytics, being able to conduct predictive maintenance and what have you. And the general requirements around that in terms of determining whether your remote access server or indeed any of the components that sit within the application. General requirements for that is a risk assessment based on the specification to understand what level of service you are providing, or what level of sophistication you have as a user, what the gaps are, if any, and usually there are a few around cybersecurity, and really what impact there may be around contractual agreements that you may have with your service provider, or if you're a service provider, what your contractual agreements should actually look like with your users. I touched very briefly on some of the systems that the specification addresses, and just on the left-hand side, obviously fire safety, but it also covers security, social alarms, emergency sound alarms, a combination thereof, and then basically any component or subsystem that is then used to manage any part of your remote service platform. And when you really sort of distill down, what a remote service consists of, or remote service can provide, it's really one or more read functions, one or more write functions, and one or more control functions. And a read function is very simple, something like a fire detector, where the state of the fire detector, the smoke detector, for example, is being continually pulled or read. So again, that will be covered by the specification. Writing, so that may be a configuration change to a fire alarm panel, and then in terms of control, and that may actually be, staying with the theme of fire and fire alarm panels, that actually may be silencing an alarm, or indeed triggering an evacuation of a building. And we'll come back to triggering an evacuation of a building in the next couple of slides. Martin, if you would do the honors, please. Next slide, please, Martin. I think it's my Northern Irish accent. So in terms then of the infrastructure, so the remote access. Sorry, did we move ahead one too many, Martin? Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you. So we briefly touched on the remote access server, which sort of sits right at the heart of the remote services specification and platform. When we talk about remote services infrastructure, we're basically talking about all components that make up the entirety of the platform or the infrastructure. And again, Miguel did a very good job on touching on things like end user dashboard, mobile applications, those sorts of things. All of those form, as does, for example, the copper cabling that is used for broadband and fiber communications, which will be used between multiple sites for the transfer of, in our case, fire alarm data, through to mobile networks, which again will be used for communication of data. Again, they form part of the infrastructure. And whilst the major telephony providers in each country will provide those elements, they will obviously come under the umbrella of the infrastructure for the remote services that, if you're a Siemens or a Drax Technology, what have you, that are provided, or if you are a service user, that you would expect to be as part of the overall infrastructure. Now, in terms of the infrastructure itself, we all know that fire services and fire safety has been around for a long time, but this digitization process is happening right now, and we can be accused of being slow to evolve and change in the past. That is not the case from today and going forward. The pace of change is accelerating. So, you may or may not know, but you are a user, a provider, or both in terms of remote services, especially within the context of fire safety. And you will touch on it within terms of an infrastructure. You will touch on at least one point within that infrastructure. If you're an end user, say a fire alarm engineer, you will most certainly today be using an app. If you are a estates and facilities manager or responsible for a portfolio of buildings and managing their operations and the safety of people within those, again, you will use certain points within the overall infrastructure, and that's happening today. So, everything that we've talked about today in terms of digitization and with respect to the specification of remote services, this has an impact on you. So what does this mean? Well, your use and provision of basically use and provision of the services within fire are covered by this specification. As I mentioned before, it is a legally binding specification, and you're strongly advised to gain accreditation and certification to ensure or to demonstrate to your stakeholders that your remote services, whether it's the entire life cycle, small subset, that you are actually compliant with the specification. Dare I say it, your organization may not be fully compliant. Now, I will preface that. The specification itself is not really that old. I think the specification came into force about 18 months to 2 years ago, maybe 3 at a push. And it's already just beginning to enter this cycle of re-review, feedback, and change. And the specification itself really does cover quite a bit. So it is important that you read the specification and you engage with it, because as I said before, whether you realise it or not, you are actually part of the infrastructure. Next slide, please, Martin. Next slide, please. Lovely, thank you, Martin. Okay, so the specification focuses on what the regulatory requirements are. It does talk quite a bit about and has requirements specifically around robust record keeping. And I mentioned here the golden thread. You may be aware that a number of years ago, a tragic incident in London, the Grenfell Tower fire, which killed, I think about 80 people. And following on from that, one of the UK governmental, there was a UK government report And one of the findings was that, and again, this links very tightly with the digitization process that we're all going through. The report found that there really was little to no common thread linking the fire safety records from the installation of the systems through to its maintenance and all of the records that are required to do that. And that includes things like fire risk assessments, bell testing, testing of emergency lights, all of those sorts of things, compartmentation breaches and assessments and what have you. So, you know, within the UK, this concept of a golden thread is now very much at the forefront of our industry's mind. That becomes an almost impossible task without our industry going digital. So again, you know, the legislation is pushing for this. The public demand greater safety, but they also demand the ability of us to be able to evidence that. And as I say, without digitization, that becomes an almost impossible task. There's the constant threat of cybersecurity, breaches and attacks. So as you would imagine, the specification covers that as well. And as Miguel alluded to, the training of staff, ensuring that they're competent and that there are limits to what they can do within the infrastructure, because we don't want a member of a fire alarm engineer without the right level of training and qualification to be able to access more sophisticated tools offered by a fire alarm system, for example. And then that sort of neatly moves us on then to how to manage your subcontractors, which I understand is a perennial problem. But at some point, they will have to be integrated digitally into your processes. So the specification covers or provides requirements on how to do that. And then lastly, the requirements, the specification outlines some very clear service inputs, outputs, and KPIs. Now, that I appreciate is quite a lot to digest from a standards perspective. So where on earth you may be thinking, do I start? How do I get started? At Euralarm, we've produced a webinar specifically on the remote services standard. And I think it's about an hour long, where we really have a deep dive into the specification. We look at the requirements, the different sections and how they relate together. And we also look at some strategies for implementation and accreditation. Alongside that, with my colleagues at Euralarm, we had a task group that put together a checklist for the remote services specification. So that basically allows you to very quickly fill the checklist in, and then at a glance see how compliant you are with standard, and of course, if there's any gaps, where they are. And I would encourage you to check those out. They're both available from the Euralarm website. A number of national bodies are available in each of the countries who are doing fantastic work at the coalface. So certainly reaching out to them. They will have their own regional and national workshops and training seminars. I know certainly in the UK we have those. But again, if in doubt, reach us to Euralarm. Conduct that risk assessment and the gap analysis of your existing infrastructure, or if you're a user, if you're a service provider at any level. If you haven't already done so, I would strongly urge you to start the process of your risk assessment. Again, if you're unsure how to start, or if you would like a template for risk assessment based on the remote services standard, again, either reach out to us here at Euralarm or reach out to your national bodies. And then last but not least is the staff and contractor awareness. And again, we can assist with that by putting you in touch with organisations at the national level that can assist. But you know, the one takeaway I hope you have from my section is that reach out to the remote services team at your alarm, and we can assist you with the interpretation of the standard and assist you with aligning with the standard, and in some cases, if you're starting almost from scratch, implement against the specification. And with that, I think that's my last slide. I would like to hand it back over to Jon.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much, Miguel, Anya, and Fabio. I thought
we have one last.
You're taking it away from me already, but good. I'm looking forward to your takeaways. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanna leave a few takeaways, which I think are very relevant for where we are with this industry. I mean, we are going through a phenomenal amount of innovation, and this is something that I want to leave with you. The amount of new technologies coming into fire safety. I think this makes this industry more attractive to young talent, to people trying to pursue a technical career. I think the innovation that we're bringing is a huge contribution to, for example, false alarms and the resilience of the buildings. And as we look at the industry and the whole technology world, where new fire risks are appearing with I don't know, electrical vehicles, lithium-ion batteries. So our industry is actively pursuing to bring safety to all of those new risks. And this innovation combined with the digital services, I think makes our industry very dynamic and very attractive today. We are a key component into the smart buildings. So there is no smart building without smart safety. And we are in the middle of that now. We are, as an industry, expected to be digital. So today, if you look at building operation, facility management, and the experts in facility managers, in a lot of cases, we see that we're going in through a generation change with many people retiring and new, very dynamic, very Gen Z, digital native type of facility management is coming into the operation of the new buildings. If you look at how procurement, how production lines, how complex campus and buildings are operated today, those people expect digital technologies, and fire is now bringing that. Our industry going digital embraces remote work. So it brings that life balance that we are all expecting. We are seeing also a huge commitment to the environment and sustainability. I mean, just to mention a couple of things, we see more and more manufacturing with environmentally safe products, recycled products, circular economy. I mean, the logistics and the way in which we do the activities turns to be more and more carbon neutral, and there are plans in all companies to operate the service activities on carbon neutral type of vehicles. We see a commitment with diversity and inclusion in our industry, and last and very important, we have a purpose. I mean, we are protecting life, and that is a nice feeling when you're in this industry. With that, I'm gonna give that back to Jon now.
Well, I'm glad that you added these points. I think they really are quite important. And you talked about staff retiring and the need of more personnel. I think sometimes we forget this happens not only in our companies, but also in our customers. Yes. And that change really is, I think, behind this whole remote services and the necessity of remote services going forward. Because a lot of our customers, from what I've seen, are lacking the detailed knowledge that they used to have. And especially when it comes to very new subjects like cybersecurity, there is a lot of information that they don't have, and therefore I think what we can do with digitalization, those new services, but also covering from the old services and the lack of know-how. So very good. Thank you very much. Now, Martin, I understand that there's a poll, and is this online?
That is correct, Jan. If everything operates as it should be, then you should see a poll on your screen, either in the center or on the right side of your screen. And the only question that I have to the attendants, if they would be so kind to answer the questions with yes, no, maybe, or any other suggestion that there is. Go through the 3 questions, and then we can see the final results here within a couple of minutes, if everything goes well as planned. And as far as I'm concerned, if everybody can see what I see on my screen, then I would say start your answers and we'll see what the results will be.
Does everybody see these questions? Does anybody have a question on where to find them?
No, I don't see them.
Okay, if you go on top, where you've got the chat, the Q&A, almost at the end before the more, you have a polls button. And if you go on to that one, you'll have the questions. Were you able to find it?
Right, yeah.
Good. So we already have quite a few responses. I think we have 43 responses, so I guess it would be good to go on to those. Do you think digital fire services will support your building operation? Well, you've got 91% that says yes, 2% says no. Maybe you can write down the reason that you believe that it would not in the chat. I'd be interested, and maybe you've got 7%. If you go to the next question, that's are you ready to digitize your fire systems? Only 67% there are ready, 11% are not ready, and 22% aren't sure whether they're ready or not. So when do you think you'll be ready? Now is 41%, much more is within 3 years, 43%, and within 5 years, 14%. Very interesting. Or not willing to connect to the cloud, 2%. Of course, we have customers especially in critical infrastructure, but maybe others that are concerned about being on the cloud because of cybersecurity, and this is clearly understood. Interesting. Martin?
Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, I'll open it to all of you for any questions. If you write down any of your questions on the chat, you've got 4 persons that look like they're all ready to give you some, at least their views on your questions. Oh, that's not a lot of questions. So let me go back to the 3 questions and try to understand. In the first question, do you think that digital fire services will support your building operations? you've got maybe 7%. Is anybody willing to expose themselves by asking or giving us a little bit more details on this?
That is a little bit complicated.
Oh, am I making it complicated, Martin, by asking that people talk?
Yeah, why not? If anybody wants to unmute and just ask a question, that's also welcome.
Unmute yourself and ask your question. That might be easier than putting everything in the chat.
Okay, then let's go to the second question, because that second question maybe has a lot.
I'm willing to chime in.
Good.
Dennis Jensen from TLX Technologies. I mean, for me, remote monitoring technology has been around for years, and I'm trying to understand the barriers to market-wide adoption around the globe, because we know it's going to save lives, right? It's going to reduce costs. We're already seeing it in other markets. So is it end user education? Is it buyer education? Is it problems with the OEMs absorbing costs in system development? Or is there just a lack of regulations that'll force the adoption?
It's a very good question, and I at least I'll quickly give a go before I'll let Miguel. I also have been in the industry more from the security side than the fire side, and have offered these services for many years. I'd say 10, 15 years we've been doing remote services, especially managed services. And we asked ourselves the same question. It's one of the reasons that in Europe we pushed for this norm that Brian was talking about, this remote services norm, so as to give a regulatory answer to customers as to what they have as rights. So we did it as much for the end customers as we did it for the service providers, and having a quality norm for that. And I think it's important that to your question, I think there is a lot of questioning. Is it safe? Do I feel comfortable to doing this? However, I must say the pandemic certainly helped this situation. As much as it wasn't so pleasant, I think a lot of customers figured out that you could do safely a lot more than they had thought in the past. Miguel, you wanted to answer?
Yeah, hi, Dennis. Thanks for the question. It's a very relevant and very important question. And I think when we look at the barriers for connecting, the barriers are on several fronts. So the cybersecurity concern is there. Although we start to see that the willingness to connect and the value perceived in the services is surpassing the perception of the risk, and more customers are willing to connect. The second aspect is the infrastructure and the cost. I mean, it's not huge, but there is a cost, a setup cost, and there is a recurrent cost. And sometimes for the customers, they need to still understand the value towards the benefit. Once we are able to show what technology can do, and do demos and show part of the reports that I described before, there is no doubt about it. Customers are immediately convinced. And there is a third aspect that I want to mention, which is the platforms. I mean, service can be available on a global basis because they are developed, but then is to the local organization and the local branch to be able to deliver them. And that sometimes includes that a database talk to an SAP system, and then a subscription management system is able to regulate all of the prices and the subscriptions that are being onboarded, activated, and made available. So there is a little bit of all of those aspects that are barriers, but those barriers are becoming lower and lower. And we see a market that is hungry for connecting. Of course, there's always going to be a percentage of infrastructure that is critical and that is in the today's conditions not willing to go to a public cloud. But I can see clearly that percentage is becoming smaller and smaller, and we see the willingness to connect in several or in all regions is becoming bigger. Thank you for the question.
Any other comments from Brian or Fabio or Anya?
Just one comment from me, and again, thank you, Dennis, for your question. We touched on this a number of times during today's webinar. I think when we see a move of a certain age group out of the industry, and obviously that will bring with it challenges, but resistance that we're currently getting, or that we've certainly seen was very prevalent in the past. I think, alluding to what Miguel was saying, I think you'll see a slight acceleration in the uptake, because you're coming into contact now with a generation that really has had digital technology, I think, almost from they were small children, if not for their entire lives. So there's much less concern with moving to global cloud-based, fully connected, always connected data sharing services.
Anybody else? Dennis, I've got a question. Where in the world are you?
TLX Technologies is headquartered in the United States, but we, support the fire suppression industry globally.
Right.
I did have a follow-up question. I think it'd be more for Brian. Brian, in looking at EN 50710 standard, do you know if it differentiates between remote data monitoring and remote control services? Because the risk is radically different.
Yes. Brian? I don't know if you can hear you right now. I think there was a problem with the sound.
Sorry, Dennis.
Can you repeat the question, Dennis?
Yeah, looking at the standard, I was wondering for 50710 if there's a differentiation between remote data monitoring, so only seeing the information, and then having remote control, because the risk is radically different.
Yes, yes, they're two distinctly separate things, and you're absolutely right, Dennis. Much more risk with regards to the control of systems remotely. This is something within the organization that I work with, we are really grappling with, because it's almost, dare I say it, the holy grail, but it brings with it just so many risks, and we're not alone. So in answer to your question, yes, both are by the specification, but they're treated as two distinct operations, if you like.
So if I may, the norm has split the remote functions into three. The first is read, and I think that's the first one that you were referring to. The second one is control functions, and the third one is write functions. So yes, the document did split that because it is so important that it is clear to the customer what is being done, and that there isn't a generic no, but that especially that he allows the information going from the system back to either the service provider or the manufacturer.
Oh, that's awesome. The petroleum industry about 15 years ago made the migration to digital monitoring, but they didn't they weren't really good with the controls and standardizations and regulations, and it allowed for mass compromising of infrastructure. So I think that the way that your alarm as a standards body is going to help people understand and divide these different regulations, get them up on security, I think it's going to help adoption.
Yeah, I think so too, and that's why I stated when this norm was done, it really was to make it clear that number one, we believe that, like Miguel said, if we explain it correctly to a customer, he'd be interested. But in that phase, that he can do it depending on the needs and what he wants to allow being done, and not that it's that we take remote functions as being all the same. So, are there any other questions?
I've got a question. My name's Nigel from UL, and I've got a question about remote monitoring, and I guess it's very similar to what Dennis was asking before. So, are we talking with 507 about remote monitoring for ARCs, for alarm response, or deactivation of alarms, or activation of alarm systems to evacuate buildings, whatever it is? Are we talking about that through public cloud use? Because there's certain elements of that that a manufacturer is not going to be in control of. So how does 507 get around that?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Nigel. So remote services covers all the specification, covers all of that. Now, so let's take an example. Let's say, for example, an Amazon of this world decides they're going to step in and they're going to provide everything that you've just described. But basically, they're going to provide a subscription-based service which covers everything within the standards. Now they may not manufacture the devices, but they manage the infrastructure, and they manage the services, and they manage the training of end users and what have you. So the specification is very clear on what requirements as the service provider, an Amazon like would need to provide, and in that sort of contrived example, they are also providing the infrastructure. So because they put in fiber in San Francisco and all these sorts of places. So in this sort of contrived example, they would throw a lot of money at this, and they would own the entire infrastructure. Now that's sort of a very sort of Plato-like world, but back in the real world, you're absolutely right. If you are providing an element of remote service, then whilst you might not be manufacturing the devices, say fire alarm detectors, or indeed, for example, 3G, 4G wireless routers that would enable remote access into a particular customer site to then monitor their systems, it is incumbent upon you as the provider of a well-defined service. It's incumbent upon you to guarantee or to basically guarantee that the systems, the hardware, the systems, the infrastructure that you are buying in and installing are fit for purpose. They're properly configured. They're regularly monitored. The people who are installing them and using them, configure them, have adequate training and up-to-date training. So, some organizations within your alarm or members of your alarm will be, I dare I say it, like a Siemens, who would be providing larger, richer, more complex services, part of which they may actually build and design, build and deploy infrastructure, and then much smaller companies, say for example the small 3, 4, maybe 5, 6 person staffed company that does fire alarm maintenance, but they too, if they provide any, for example, they may provide remote access to their fire maintenance records, so that their clients can come in and see those remotely online, but again, within the context of what they're doing. And in conjunction with the specification, they must meet the requirements of the specification that relate to the service that they provide. So it scales up and down depending on where you are in the complexity. If that makes sense. But,
Yeah,
but if you are
Robert, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Brian's explained it quite eloquently, and the other side is that 507010 covers the how and who's doing it. The TS50 50136 part 10 covers what the kit can do it. So there are two separate standards that cover it.
So one of them is the technical solution for having a remote, for the remote infrastructure and having a safe remote infrastructure. And the 50710 is more directed toward the service providers and what they have to conform to. Did that answer your question?
I think really I need to go and read the standard, have a look through it, because I still have questions. I can understand obviously the hardware side of things. I can understand the actual service provider, but as soon as you throw it in the cloud, basically Amazon's controlling the data, and there's no guarantees it's going to get where it needs to be. So that's where my concern sort of sits.
Again, that comes down to that really comes down to an architectural design and implementation decision. So, for example, you don't have to. So for example, I'm working on a project at the moment. Now, it's not related to fire, but it is life safety. We're pulling data from at various points remotely and securely, and we're not using Amazon servers. So we've built our own server cluster. We manage that, and we use a VPN tunnel to get the data back into our services, back into our on-site server cluster. So depending on your app. If your appetite for risk is low and your appetite for control is high, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I actually think that's quite a good thing, but that comes with its own challenges. Then you can certainly go down the route that I just described. In fact, you can go much further down the rabbit hole. So, and if that is what your client is mandating, well, there are ways and means of doing that, right the way through to This example, I think, still is within the spirit of remote services. It depends on what your definition of remote is. So, say for example, you have a client that is a leading manufacturer, let's say a pharma company. Now, I don't have direct access of big pharma, but I'm just using it as an example, where within their security ring, if you like, within their manufacturing sites or indeed the research facilities, they would want anybody inside the security ring. They want to be able to have access to data that's coming in from fire alarm systems, CCTV, etc., all to a central place. But it's located, it's hosted on site, albeit a massive site, where they basically have replicated the cloud at a very local level. So from a technology point of view, there are a number of different ways of slicing and dicing this, and as I say, it comes down to what your appetite for risk is and what your appetite for control is based on the requirements that you have.
Okay. Thank you for that.
It's a great question. It's a great question, and you're very right to be concerned, because I don't have a view on what I'm about to say, but there have been instances where cloud data sitting in another country is under that country's jurisdiction of law. And again, you have to take, now that's been well known for a while, but you have to take a view on that. And if your view is, well, I want my data residing in UK jurisdiction or France or Germany, i.e. EU, then you'll make that decision based on, again, how comfortable you are, how sensitive the data, how commercially valuable to you is the data. There's a huge amount to think about, and yes, I thoroughly recommend the specification as a little bedtime reading.
Hopefully it's not too long.
No, neither of the documents are extremely long, and I think they are fairly straightforward, especially the 50710. This one, when we worked on it, I think we did make sure that it was usable and readable. Sometimes the technical specifications can be a bit complex, but here, when we worked on it, the team that was working on it, this was an important point. Are there any other questions? It doesn't seem as though there's any other questions. I appreciate the two questions that came up in the point that, especially the first one asked the question of why is it that people aren't adopting remote services that quickly? And the second question that came in gave some of the examples of why maybe there's some reticence. I think as Euralarm, we certainly took and we continue to take the view, let's put in some safety factors for customers with regulation wherever necessary to help us provide and show to end customers that these services are safe. Whether it's on site or whether it's remotely, there's always going to be safety issues. But we did look to see what we could put in a regulatory framework to make it transparent, both for the service provider and for the end customer. And I think that transparency will help us see more customers jump onto this bandwagon. And I think part of the reason is that they'll be forced to with the lack of own resources going forward. So, are there any other comments from our four panelists? Anya, anything from you as a closing statement?
I think it was a very interesting discussion, and I'm looking forward to the next webinars, because I think there is always, how can I say, with the discussion that we had around the standards, maybe a next webinar about looking into more details of the standard or anything like that. But yeah, good discussion.
Anything from you, Brian?
Only to say thank you everybody for attending today, and just to repeat what I said, if you're unsure, if you would like some more information, reach out. This is what we're here for at Euralarm, and we'll do our best to help.
Great, thank you. Fabio, anything from you?
No, thank you. I'm good. Thanks for having me, and thanks to the attendants.
And thank you. And Miguel?
The only additional comment is that today digital services add a huge amount of value for complex operation, add certain value for mid-sized operation, and add maybe some small value to small systems. But this is just the beginning. So I just want to say, in the complexity of big operations, the digital services, they bring a huge amount of support to facility managers. That's my closing statement.
Then to all of you, thank you very much. for participating, for those of you that joined us, and thank you for the 4 of you for your great presentations. It's appreciated. Wishing you a good rest of the day.